Dajaho, hi guys, it's Janae and welcome back to my channel, and today I am continuing my read along for silent reading, otherwise known as Modu Volume 4. And once again, it seems like the audio is not working, so I don't have the time at the moment to try and figure out what is causing the issue. I might need to get a new mic, I might need to start saving up for that, great. But yeah, for now we're just hoping that you guys can still hear me somewhat. And yeah, again, we are here super early because my mom has an online meeting today, so she is gonna be using the internet for the time that I usually do my live streams, and unfortunately our internet is not stable enough to sustain both me live streaming and her having her meeting, so we're just living here at the moment. Hi! I'm very glad you can hear me. Thank goodness. Okay. Um, so yeah, we have 110 more pages to go before the end of the novel, and we have until Friday to finish said novel. So that being said, we're gonna do as many hours today as needed to get through at least 55 pages. And yeah, I don't want to waste too much time. We're going to be taking the break on the hour as usual for 10 minutes, and I have tea here with me for the first hour to sustain me. So sorry, let me just quickly put this off. But I think we can more or less just get started. Let me quickly pop out the chat and then we can get going. Okay, so we are on chapter 120, Verhovensky 30. Bayern's Longyun Center was a multi-story building occupying a well-situated position with excellent feng shui. The whole building was made up of over 30 floors with with a hotel above, a commercial area below, and a revolving restaurant stuck between them. When the light was just right, it would go through the clear glass floor to the ceiling windows and paint a glittering. Oh, sorry, I read that as separate things. Through the clear glass floor to ceiling windows and paint a glittering rainbow on the buildings next to it. Ooh, I like that description. Though right now the sun hadn't risen yet. The revolving restaurant wasn't a single unit. The four corners were divided into self-service restaurant, a Western restaurant, a Southeast Asian restaurant, and a restaurant that served modified home cooking. That was the one that put baby bok choy into its Buddha jumps over the wall. Huh, okay. Among them, the self-service restaurant in the southeast corner was the one that delivered 24-hour meal service to the hotel's guests and opened a breakfast room every morning at 6. At 4 in the morning, a few bustling young girls were already changing the flowers on the restaurant's dining tables to prepare for another day of welcoming guests. They just worked the night shift when they'd been called at all times and were about to swap shifts at the at a quarter past 4. Woo! Okay, this is not a good start to the reading. Oh, okay. Let's try this again. Cleaning the bathrooms and arranging the dining room was their last tasks. The service workers here were all ordinarily around 20 years old. Some had come from out of town to find work, and some were university students working part-time. They were all young and fresh, and at any rate could look pleasing to the eye once they were cleaned up. I don't know how I feel about that. The shift leader was a girl with her hair in a ponytail. Her hands were defter at changing flowers than anyone else's, not spilling a drop of water from the vases. When she changed them, she'd move them around a little into a suitable, simple arrangement. Come quick, Wei Wei dear, the first round of dim sum is ready. The shift leader with the ponytail gave an affirmative, gave the dining hall a last close look, then followed the girl into the back kitchen. The morning's first round of dim sum was often to warm up the kitchen implements. The cooks wanted to get a sense for the freshness of the new ingredients and taste the new seasonings. The head cook would also sometimes take this opportunity to instruct the apprentices. Any, Anything made during this time was an experiment and wouldn't be given to the guests to eat. Ordinarily, it was the benefit for the night shift staff workers. If they couldn't finish eating, they could take it away with them. After being on shift all night, the girls' stomachs were rumbling with hunger. They followed the aroma, chirping, swarming around. The shift leader, called Wei Wei, wasn't in a rush. She waited for everyone to leave, then unhurriedly went over and used a one-time use sanitary bag to gather up the remaining little pastries. Are you giving that to those losers again? A girl looked at her as she fixed her makeup and curled her lips, saying, Let me tell you, Wei Wei dear, it's easy for those bumpkins to flatter themselves when you're so nice to them. Also, are they worthy of eating this? They can't even tell imitation shark fin from the real stuff. I am very much not a fan of seafood overall, and I don't like the smell of shark, let's put it like that. The norm they normally put any kind of the pig slop or dog food into their mouths. Their tongues are pretty much there for decoration. To my way of thinking, they're only worthy of buying some buns filled with toilet paper on the street. I don't like this person. She seems very rude. Wei Wei smiled, not arguing with her. The girls at a high-ranking restaurant were all trained in posture and etiquette, wore clean and tidy uniforms every day, and had to wear makeup to work. Among these surroundings, as time went on, they began to get the mistaken impression that they were also high-ranking people and rather looked down on the security guards downstairs who were working the night shift along with them. Wei Wei was kind and well-intentioned. Whenever she worked the night shift, she'd take some of the dim sum she couldn't finish eating, and on her way off work, deliver it to the security guards. They were all people unable to sleep through the long night, who could only take pity on each other. The other girls and the cooks had seen this all before. Maybe they thought she was silly. She didn't fawn on guests, but was always making friends with useless people. Well, I like her, just from the sound of that. Wei Wei stuck her earbuds into her ears and quietly hummed along to the lively tune playing over them. Perhaps because she was about to get off work, her steps were a little brisk. She went downstairs by the employee passage, divided up the wrapped up dim sum among all the security guards on duty and on patrol. She went all the way from the revolving restaurants on the 10th floor to the surveillance center in the basement. There were normally two people on duty in the surveillance center. One was a newly hired boy, only 18 or 19 years old, and dumpy. He shared his shift with a sly old bully who slept soundly in the break room next door, making the boy pop up his eyelids and watch the cameras himself. Shame. Past 4 in the morning was when people were at their most tired. Having a pretty girl come to visit was undoubtedly refreshing, but sadly the young security guard couldn't quite enjoy it. Wei Wei had bought a type of bun today with an especially strange flavor. Apparently the filling contained some Thai spice. The young security guard didn't have the stomach to digest Thai plants. When he'd eaten two, his belly began to ache as though there was a storm inside it. He bore it for a while in front of the girl, but his belly only made an even larger disturbance. He really couldn't hold back anymore. He made a pained expression. Wait, dear, could you help me out? I have to go to the bathroom. Did I misread that? Bathroom. Oh no, my mouse was in front of that. I was like, what? First I was like the lavatory, and then I thought bathroom, and then I was like, okay, maybe he was like doing a colloquialism where it's like a lathroom, a lavatory bathroom. I don't know. The leaps my mind just made. Sorry about that. The guy who works the shift with me is mad when he wakes up. I don't dare to wake him. Wei agreed without argument. The young security guard sighed in relief and hastily ran off, holding up his pants. Hearing the rush footsteps recede, the girl's dazzling smile gradually vanished. She somewhat nervously took a deep breath, counting 20 in her mind, focused, and took a very small, specially designed flash drive out of her pocket. She turned her head and looked at the surveillance camera screens behind her. Around noon on the 6th of November, she recited internally. The surveillance camera records from the revolving restaurant, the lobby downstairs, the front and back doors, and the parking garage. The more detailed, the better. There was an untold number of security cameras in the Long Yun Center. She swiftly determined each camera's sequence number and quickly pulled up the records from November 6th for those cameras. A wind blew down the corridor, lightly moving the door of the camera room, as though someone was passing. Wei turned her head to investigate twice, her palms breaking out in sweat. She nervously watched the progress bar. Each second seemed to be endless. Suddenly, a cough came from the break room next door. Wei was scared into a shudder, instantly growing cold from head to foot. Reflexively reaching out a hand and getting ready to pull out the flash drive. There was a rustling sound in the break room. The lazy security guard who was sleeping on the job had woken up. The progress bar was almost at the end. Wei clenched her teeth lightly. Someone shouted from the break room in a sleepy, blurred voice. Shameng! Shameng! The camera room had insufficient heating. The people on duty usually had to wrap up in jackets and coats, but there was a hot sweat at the corners of Wei's forehead. The door of the break room creaked open. The man put a foot out. Shameng went to the bathroom. It's me, Uncle Wang. In a moment of desperation, the girl suddenly spoke. In a very sweet voice, she said, Since you guys have been working so hard, I brought you something to eat. Oh, Wei. Warm from his bedding, the old security guard had wanted to come out wearing only his thermal underwear. As soon as he heard the girl's voice, he felt uncomfortable and hastily retreated to the break room to get dressed. Through the door, he said, thank you. There aren't many young girls as nice as you now. Wei, not turning a hair, lowered her head and let out a breath, her chest feeling unpleasantly choked. I'm only offering you someone else's gifts, Uncle Wang. You're too polite. When the old security guard had gotten dressed, fixed his appearance and come out, he saw the girl idly leaning against the table, playing on her phone. He hastily said, That joker Shameng. He's a disgrace. I'll give him a telling off when he gets back. You should hurry home. It's nearly lights out. Wei smiled at him, pulled her jacket tightly around herself as though nothing were the matter, and, as the old security guard counseled her to be careful on her way, she gently squeezed the flash drive in her pocket. That was so good. And the fact that they got it so precisely and the adaptation as well. Before daybreak, Beiyun Longyun I don't know why I'm struggling saying that. Center's security camera footage had passed through a few people and ended up in Feidu's hands. This is the security camera footage from some important locations in the Longyun central building from the day Wei Wenqian invited his guests. Fei Du turned on the laptop and, without raising his eyelids, said to the circle of police officers watching him, "Don't worry, my people were absolutely unnoticed. This won't alert the enemy." It also isn't completely illegal, but they might overlook that. Cao Ren and Zhao Haiyang had been put up for the night in Luo Wenzhou's guest bedroom and study. Because they didn't have experience, they hadn't locked the doors at night, and each had been stepped on a good number of times by Luo Yuguo, who knew how to open doors. Oh, the little details, I love it. But also the idea that they now fully know that Luo Wenzhou and Fei Du, sorry, my bad, not only live together but share a bed is hilarious, because like maybe Xiao Haiyang could have still deluded himself into thinking, oh, he's just staying here for safety reasons in the guest bedroom. Not anymore. Cao Ren felt that he'd just fallen soundly asleep when he was startled awake by a mysterious knock on the door. He rubbed his haggard face and forced himself to concentrate, asking Fei Du, "Who was that who came to give you the stuff just now? What channels did you get the security camera footage through? Are they legal?" "Some friends. I helped out a little once." Fei Du opened a video and played it on fast forward, casually dodging the question. After a while, he thought of something and couldn't resist looking up at Luo Wenzhou. Luo Wenzhou hadn't made a sound. He had a cigarette in his mouth, but didn't light it. He was only tasting it to satisfy his craving. He'd had his eyes focused on Fei Du the whole time, and his gaze bumped against Fei Du's when it floated over. Fei Du paused, then gave the laptop to Xiao Haiyang. He took off his protective glasses and slowly wiped them a few times. "Alright, actually, I imitated them. Do you remember He Zhongyi's mom, Wang Xijun? She nearly jumped off the trade building, and later, the building's boss took advantage of the commotion to stir up an elderly, bereaved villager's foundation to show his sense of corporate social responsibility. That fund's daily operations were handed over to a specialized public welfare organization. Apart from Wang Xijin, it's also responsible for taking care of all kinds of other people who have lost their means of earning a living due to wicked acts. The real backer behind that public welfare organization is me." "I found people to hold onto the stock ownership for me. It's about the same line of thought as the Guangyuan Fund." Luo Wenzhou quietly asked. "Wicked acts?" "The young man who just delivered these things, his parents died in a burglary committed by a gambling addict. The security camera records from Longyuan Center is a girl who worked there, thought of a way to get them. Oh, if I recall correctly, she's not local. She ran away from home because she couldn't take her stepfather's molestation." Fei Du said, "Though it's rather profit-minded to say it, everyone may encounter unjust things, but if they have powerful material support behind them when it happens, whatever circumstances they end up in, they still won't be in too dire straits. Thanks to Fei Chungyu's legacy." Oh. Luo Wenzhou suddenly asked, "What does Wang Xijin do now?" She's mostly having her illness treated. She hasn't gone back to her hometown. When her health is good, she does hourly work for a cleaning company. The cleaning company has a long-term service agreement with Wei Jianhong's headquarters. Feidu explained what had become of this woman whom everyone had long forgotten about without missing a beat. I mean, that does say something because it's like you kind of have to, as a police officer, as a doctor, for the most part, most works, you kind of have to care about people to the extent that you need to care about them, and then you have to let it go because otherwise you would just stay stuck within every single case that you work with. Um, but it is nice to hear that there are other people picking up where you have to leave off, kind of thing. I probably wouldn't have used her. She's too old and she's not quick witted enough. It would be easy for her to get into danger. I just had her occupy the position. When there was a need, I'd have found someone to take her place. She's lost her son and has nothing to live on. She has no hope, Owenjo said slowly. I asked you once what would happen to people like Wang Shujun. It seems that you've turned them into reserves for a vigilante police force. If he hadn't forced him to come clean, what would he have used these people to do? Where would he have gone with them in the end? Imagining it slightly, Lowenjaw broke out in a cold sweat. Looking back the way he'd come, he simply didn't know how he'd crossed that tightrope called Feidu. I mean, that's quite something. Feidu avoided his gaze. He was completely absorbed in wiping his glasses. Who knew how many hundreds of years of dust had accumulated on them? He wiped them endlessly. Just then, Shao Haiyang, with no sense of atmosphere, spoke. Wait a minute. Look, guys, is that Lo Gosheng? His call knocked apart all the feelings floating in the air, forcing everyone's gazes to move to the security camera footage. Shao Haiyang hadn't noticed at all what the people next to him had been saying. He turned the screen excitedly. This was a recording from the revolving restaurant on the day Wei Wen-chen had invited his guests from a camera at the door of that home cooking restaurant. Around noon, Wei Wen-chen took a phone call as he walked out of the restaurant. He stood waiting at the door. After a moment, the elevator opened, and a man with his hat brim pulled very low walked out. His hands were stuck in his pockets. He looked all around, then indifferently nodded to Wei Wen-chen, who'd come up to receive him. He patted the teenage boy on the back and went into the restaurant with him. I mean, if they can identify Logoshum, yeah, then that's, I don't want to say that's game over for him, but the fact that he meets with a violent murderer and lives to tell the tale is quite something, you know? I feel like that could be used as evidence in and of itself. The man's figure was tall and robust. He was wearing gloves. His posture as he walked was exactly the same as Logo Shung's when he'd been filmed that night at the Drum Tower. Likely because he was well aware there were cameras around, even though he knew those territory, whose territory Long Yun Center was, he still cautiously kept his head down. The camera couldn't catch his face head on, great. Not having a face shot is nothing to worry about. We can get technicians to run comparison on his height, weight, figure, and habitual movements. That can also be evidence that he's Logo Sheng. As soon as he got excited, Shao Haiyang's speech once again became quick. Wei Wen-chen had contact with a murderer a long time ago, and he brought the murderer in on purpose to have a look at his target. They can't deny this. We can detain them. Wait a minute. Wenjo held him down. Don't rush. Leave the segment for now. We'll talk when we've caught Logo Sheng alive. It won't be over if we only catch Wei Wen Chen. Will it be a problem as to how the footage was obtained, though? There were eyes at the city bureau. As soon as they alerted the enemy, Wei Jianhong and his son were likely to end up becoming shields like Zheng Kaifeng. The critical point was to track those people down to their den. Shao Haiyang remembered the listening device in Taoyang's bag. His expression was shaken. He didn't make a sound. Let's see which way he left. Less than 5 minutes after Lu Gusheng followed Wei Wenchen inside, he'd recognized his targets and left. While the service workers weren't paying attention, he quickly went around the back to the employee passage, got a card out from somewhere, swiped open the door to the passage, and left. The employee passage was different from the ordinary passages used by the guests. It opened onto a small door at the back of the building. The girl who'd copied the recordings had done it thoroughly. She hadn't left out the store. 3 minutes later, Lu Gusheng appeared in range of the camera at the back door. He pulled his hat brim even lower and also put on a face mask. He was nearly fully protected. Suddenly, Lu Gusheng lifted his head and looked in the direction of the camera. He was thoughtful for a moment, then called someone. In a small intersection on the corner, a black sedan that had started to show its head backed up into the camera's blind spots. Lu Gusheng strode over. Then the car flashed past the camera. The camera filmed an ordinary black Buick. There was no license plate, damn it. I'm trying to remember. I think we didn't have the fallout in the same way that we had in the show after Lu Wenjuo's parents visited. So I'm wondering how Lu Wenjuo officially meets Du Jia, or if we're gonna officially meet Du Jia via Lu Wenjuo ever. We have to, though. He's kind of a big part of the story. The people who'd been watching the video, their attention fixed and their breath suspended, simultaneously breathed out. Lu Wenjuo had chewed the cigarette until shreds of tobacco were coming out. Taran rubbed his face. That joker Lu Gusheng is too careful. You can understand it. Fei Lu still hadn't raised his head. After hiding for 15 years, a person would be forced into some overcautious paranoia. The question is, what do we do now? Taran frowned, thinking. It's been nearly 2 months. Even if we canvass everyone in the area, the likelihood of finding a witness isn't high. Lu Wenjuo frowned, chewing the tobacco shreds. He was silent for a while. Then he suddenly asked, Shao Haiyang, what are you looking at? Is this a high-definition camera? Shao Haiyang suddenly asked, pointing at the corner of the screen. There's a convex reflector there. Well done on Shao Haiyang for noticing that. Chapter 121, Verhovensky 31. The black Buick really had been positioned in the camera's blind spots. If it had gone forward a little, the camera would in fact have caught the front lens plates. Lu Gusheng had evidently noticed this and immediately notified his accomplice to back up before the car could show itself, shielding the front plates. This would have been a very timely action if there hadn't been a convex reflector at the corner. Convex reflectors were ordinarily placed at intersections and comparatively complicated turnings to give drivers a view of cars and pedestrians turning from other directions. The convex reflector at the corner mainly faced the intersection. In other words, the camera was aimed at a large portion of the back of its head. Both were facing the same direction. Reasonably speaking, the camera wouldn't have caught what was reflected in the mirror, so Lugusheng had overlooked it. Unfortunately, while he'd taken 1,000 precautions, one had slipped through. An open window was reflecting half of the convex reflector. Furthermore, the Longyun Center's installations were all luxurious. The surveillance system used the most expensive high-definition cameras. I mean, considering it's a fancy hotel, I feel like that's actually quite believable. When they'd enlarged the section, they could vaguely distinguish the last three digits of the license plate number. Xiao Haiyang pushed his glasses, wanting nothing better than to dive into the screen. 336. I can't see what's in front of it. Maybe it's a 3 or maybe an 8. Wait, I'll carefully analyze the recording again. Don't worry, a trace is enough. Lugusheng fixed his gaze on... sorry. Lu Wenzhou fixed his gaze on Lugusheng in the screenshot, then shot up, picked up his phone, and dialed the number. Oh, this part. I remember this part. Hello, Lord Chu. It's me. I have a favor to ask. A little while ago, some bastard scraped my significant other's car and wasn't caught at the time. The fact that he specifies / doesn't specify significant other instead of girlfriend. Oh, no injuries. The car was empty at the time, otherwise wouldn't we know who it was? It's actually not a big deal. The important thing is that the car's paint is pretty expensive. It's half a year of our wages to get it repainted. Yes, fine, please look into it for me. Don't tell anyone else. I'd rather this little private business not get out. After all, it violates principles. Or discipline, sorry. A black Buick looks pretty well maintained around noon on November 6th in Beiyang, near Beiyang's Longyun Center. A security camera nearby caught a flash of the end of its license plate number, 336. I have a feeling it's likely to be a local car. Alright, thank you. Sorry, you're really helping me out. I'll bring you some packs of good cigarettes in a bit. He put down the phone and saw Xiao Haiyang staring at him, his glasses having slipped down again. I mean, like one significant other, like other. I don't know what. What are you looking at? Lu Wenzhou pushed at his head. Is it heroic to fool around on your own, trying to do everything instead of asking someone? Our country is the most richly endowed with population. Don't be so confident, idiot. When it gets light, Taran and Xiao Haiyang go to the city bureau and do what you need to do. Wait to hear from me. I'm going to the main traffic police team. Feidu, you wait for word from me. 2. Don't do anything rash. Enough, stop wiping, you're going to wear a hole in the lens. I'm thinking about something, Feidu suddenly said in a low voice. Lugusheng has been running away all these years. There isn't much information about him, and no one did a psychological profile of him back then, so we've been acting on perceptions, thinking he's a cruel, ruthless, and extremely audacious person. Yes, what else would he be? Taran said. 14 years ago, Lugusheng revealed himself once in the police force's line of sight, though it later came to nothing. This time, however, after killing Feng Bin, he even more carelessly let Xia Xiaonan go and dared to openly appear in a public venue. Feidu put his spotless glasses back onto his nose. Comprehensively, this person gives me the feeling of being careless, arrogant, and disdainful. It's likely he has dissociative and manic episodes. While his IQ isn't low, when he commits crimes, there's an element of venting. He's unruly, very unsettled. Simply speaking, he's somewhat crazy. I've always thought he's remained at liberty so long because someone's been protecting him. Lokusheng shouldn't be like this. He shouldn't be this cautious, nor have such a strong sense of measures to counteract police surveillance. I mean, that's very fair considering how reckless he was at this point. Beiyan's Longyun center was Wei Jianhong's territory, but Wei Jianhong truly may not have known at first what his darling son was up to. However bad Wei Sr. he was still bad in sensible ways. His goals were clear and he knew how to avoid risks. His methods were rather concealed. Taking out a hit on a classmate for the sake of a school power struggle really was too imperial. I don't think that's how you pronounce it, but we're just going to keep going. Too inconsiderate of the consequences. An adult wouldn't have made such a reckless blunder. Wei Wenchen had simply landed his father in a hole with this. Lokusheng must have clearly understood this, so he evidently hadn't treated the Longyun center as his own territory. He'd taken precautions against everyone, including his idiotic youthful employer. But the contradiction was, since he'd been this uneasy, why had he personally shown his face on November 6th? Whether he'd wanted to look at the assassination target or the employer, there really was no need for Luo Gusheng to personally show himself. Couldn't he have made Wei Wenchen give him a recording? Even the surveillance footage from the resident's private room? What do you mean? Sha Haiyang asked quickly. Are you saying that may not be Luo Gusheng? No, not only is his body language exactly the same as in the video from the drum tower, you could also see his uneven eyes when he looked up at the camera. Such unusual eyes would be hard to mistake. No, I mean, I made something of an error earlier. He may not have gone to look at Feng Bin that day. Who else was in that private room? I need a list of names, especially the girls. Why the girls? Feidu slowly looked up. I want to know whether he didn't try to kill Sha Nan because of transference. What kind of transference? Taran can think of a roundabout way to get it when he goes back to the city bureau, Luo Wenzhou said quickly. Though right now, the most important business is to find where Luo Gusheng is hiding. As long as we catch him, we can observe him or interrogate him however we want. This is all coming together after a long delay. We have to strike fast. Everyone listen up. First, be quick. Second, maintain secrecy. Third, look after yourself. Fourth, be careful of your communication devices. If you can't be certain you aren't being overheard, take care when you speak. Comrade Xiao Haiyang, please control your magic machine gun mouth a little. Don't just spit out things. Xiao Haiyang didn't realize that he was making fun of him for rambling. Hearing this, he calmly explained himself. Captain Luo, while I only scraped by in my physical stamina test, I'm not an... I don't like that. There was something I wanted to say. Oh, with regards to the transference, I can't remember the people Luo Gusheng worked with originally was his older brother and his older brother's girlfriend, right? So there wouldn't be a transference thing there. Did they have a younger sister that we don't know about? Because I don't think this part was included in the show, so I'm kind of going in blind here. Or my memory is terrible. However large the room was, 4 grown men milling around in it together would make it seem crowded. But they scattered in the blink of an eye and the room instantly became peaceful. From the moment he'd opened his eyes in the morning, Feidu had been tense. They'd been busy ever since. It wasn't yet light. The room was a mess. Last night's hot pot hadn't been scrubbed yet, only put to soak in the sink along with the stack of plates and bowls. Fedu opened a window to air out the room. He wanted to clean up a little, but he didn't know where to start. He had to play his stock trick, calling someone to come over. At this critical juncture, he really couldn't call an outsider. Fedu had to call his own person. This was a kindly-faced old lady surnamed Sung. Her miserable life experience didn't show on her features. Her hometown was a D city, her husband had died young, and she'd worked hard to raise her son. Had grown up, got married, and had raised her son, have him, had seen him grow up, get married, and have a child. Why is that sentence so hard to read? There was a next generation. She just happily moved into a new home and was planning to enjoy old age and play with her grandchild. But the blessings of ordinary people are frail. She happened to live in the estate belonging to Wei Jianhong's unfortunate competitor. When the attack took place, old lady Sung was walking around outside pushing the baby stroller. Her grandson, less than a year old, had been lifted by the killer and faithfully thrown to the ground. Her daughter-in-law had no one to blame and could only vent her grievance on the old lady. Her grievance had led her to get a divorce. The old lady's son couldn't stand the shock. He'd gone driving drunk and hit a roadside railing, dying as well. Damn. The price of the new home that had represented happiness had been nearly halved, but there was no discount on home loans. The whole weight of the enormous loan had fallen on the white-haired, unsupported old lady. The bank had been afraid she would die halfway through repaying, and had requested to shorten the repayment period. Fedu said, "Matters aren't pressing here. It just needs to be a bit of cleaning." Sorry, I don't know why I'm struggling so much right now. Matters aren't pressing here. It just needs a bit of cleaning. If you have anything else to do, do it first and tell me when you're through. Take a taxi over when you're ready. I'll cover your travel expenses. There's no need to crowd onto public transportation. You rarely have any use of me, President Fay, a woman's warm voice said over the phone. Then old lady Sung stammered a bit and said, "This morning Wei Wei had something for you and it passed through my hands. I know I shouldn't say much and ask you, but could I ask, are we going to catch the bad guy soon?" Fedu faced the open window, looking toward the distant horizon. Clear air was coming in from outside, pouring into his lungs. "Yes," Fedu said gently, "we may be very close this time." Old Lady Sung was suddenly choked with emotion. Fine. If you need me to do anything, President Fay, have someone send word to me. You don't need to come yourself. It'll keep you from being implicated. As old as I am, I'm not afraid of anything. I'd be alright strapping on a bomb and going to die along with them. That won't happen. Fedu lowered his eyes. We haven't reached that step. We may never reach that step now. Just then, the front door suddenly opened. Luan Zhou had remembered something and returned, wrapped in cold. Without saying a word, he charged into the kitchen and locked the liquor cabinets. A person keeping a cat had to make sure to put leftovers in the fridge, and a person keeping President Fay had to make sure to lock the liquor cabinets at the proper moment. Why is that so funny? And the fact that again Fedu is being compared to a cat is just so... Oh, it's peak. Fedu... ... Not bad at all. Owenjo put away his keys, looked at Fei Du, then suddenly, not making a sound, went over and hugged him, fiercely pressing him into his arms. Smelling his own body wash on Fei Du, a piece of his heart finally came crashing back down into his chest, and he sighed heavily in relief. Fei Du stared blankly, hesitated a moment, then slowly raised his arms and put them on his back. I Lowenjaw raised a hand, interrupting him. You're my person. If you so much as gasp for breath, you'll hear about it from me. Bear that in mind. Like, Fader was like, oh, we can use my people, and Lowenjaw was like, well, you're my person, so. Lowenjaw looked at him deeply, then once again ran out like the wind. An hour later, another round of contests of strength began at the city bureau. The parents and lawyers of the students involved all talked over each other, presenting the facts and reasoning things out, calling the police force's evidence gathering methods into question, wanting nothing better than to turn the word slander into a nail and throw it into their faces, all but putting up a banner at the city bureau's gates reading, Abuse of public authority, a singular injustice throughout the ages. One of the students' parents had managed to indirectly acquire Director Liu's phone number through some connections and had called to complain at once. Of course, Director Liu couldn't be working overtime at the city bureau over the weekend. He was annoyed beyond his endurance and had called Law Wenjaw. Of course. But Wenjaw got out his phone, took a look, then turned off the ringtone and vibration, ignoring the incoming call from his superior. Though the car you described as a common model, adding in the location, the last digits of the license plate number, and the requirements like being a local car and well maintained, there's only one car that matches all of it. Lao Chia of the main traffic police team hadn't noticed Lowenjaw's movements and showed him a screenshot from the footage shot by the surveillance network. Have a look. Is this the one? Lowenjaw came close and had a look. In the passenger seat, he dimly saw a man wearing a hat with the brim pulled low and a face mask entirely protected. He gave an involuntary shudder on the spot. Yeah, where did it go afterwards? Now Chia opened the map and drew a circle at a certain point. Around this district. It wouldn't be here. Feidu, arriving at the indicated location, issued his conclusion without even getting out of the car, only sticking his head out and taking a look. It was already nearly noon. Lo and Joe had picked Feidu up and they'd gone together to the address Lao Chia had found for him. It was almost a landmark building. Its exterior was very peculiar geometric figure. Photographed from above, it looked like a honeycomb. Therefore, it was called the Beehive. Okay, we're closing in on them. The Beehive advertised high-end consumption. It contained all kinds of entertainment facilities and luxury goods shops, as well as a large-scale food hall. Behind it was a golf course with a high fence protecting it. A flag with a golf ball drawn on it fluttered in the wind. Too showy. Feder shook his head. High-end consumption locations have all been severely investigated these last few years. The whole industry has withered up a great deal. Keeping one's criminals in as vulnerable a place as this would really be asking for it. Hiding in plain sight, perhaps? Mojo rolled down the window, signaling for him to look at the golf course gates, where a crowd of black Buicks were parked. The golf course provides pick-up and drop-off services. The cars they use are exactly the same as the one that picked up local Sheng. As he spoke, he got out a small telescope and opened up the screenshot Lao Chia had given him. The one with the license plate Yan X5 3336 must be here. Rowan drove past the telescope to Feidu, the one in the eastern corner. Think of a way to get in touch with the drivers who provide the pickup and drop-off service. Before Feidu could answer, Lowendor's phone rang again. Taran. Lowendor took a look, then shut off the screen, not picking up. Why aren't you picking up? Laulu is making him call me. Lowendor said. I told him to wait to hear from me, so Taran wouldn't just call me for no reason. I have a dozen missed calls from Laulu. I figured that he couldn't get to me, so he went to find Taran. Oh no, poor Taran. Feidu was silent for a moment. You suspect Director Lu? Lowendor paused. He didn't answer directly. Director Lu has been working longer than you've been alive. He and my Shifu were friends who went through life and death together. He carries countless scars. I don't know how many prisoners serving out life sentences or waiting for execution dream of killing him. When I'd just come to the city bureau, I personally took part in an arrest. A recently released robber had gone to his house in the middle of the night for revenge, though luckily there was an informer who gave a warning about it ahead of time. Speaking of informers, Lowendor smiled dryly. Of the informers we have on hand, a minority have special reasons, while a majority are doing it for the payments. People who get in this profession because of a special reason and special emotions often don't last long, while the ones who do it for the money can do it for a comparatively long time. There are gambling addicts among them, alcoholics, drug takers, and those shouldering high-interest loans. They're all pitiful people, but sometimes you still have to take precautions against them. When Gujao fell at the Louvre, I suspected it was likely at the hands of his own informers. Money's a vulgar thing, but it gets in at every opportunity, wrecking your faith in others until there's hardly anything left. Ooh. Why does that hurt to hear? Feidu made no comment, and in 5 minutes made him feel the power of capital. The Beehive's golf course suddenly received a pickup request. Apparently, it was a parvenu from out of town showing off his wealth by inviting some guests. The customer's requests were rude and unreasonable. He insisted on booking a driver to come pick the guests up right away. Having hit upon some divinity, the parvenu, I don't think that's how I'm supposed to pronounce it, had actually borrowed a Beehive Platinum card. A super VIP customer couldn't be offended. The whole fleet of black sedans at the golf course's gates was compelled to set out in full force. Lowendor. ... Come on, let's eat first. Feidu stepped on the gas pedal, driving in the direction of the Beehive's entertainment center, showing a faint smile. All this time, and I haven't asked you out for a good meal yet. We're going on a date! Okay. Okay, so we're at the end of the chapter, so I think I'm gonna end the first hour here, do the 10-minute break, and then we'll be back for the next hour at 7 past-ish. Yeah, let's make it that. Okay, we're back. I hope the audio is still audible. The bare minimum. Oh goodness, I'm sorry, guys. Okay. I feel like because I know that the mic isn't working properly, I should just accept my fate and just pull the laptop a bit closer so it can pick up the sound more easily. And let's hope for the best. Okay, so we were at the top of page 332. Pull up the chat again. Okay, chapter 122, Verhovensky 32. The man in the back seat weighed most of 200 gin. He took up a whole row and was speaking in a mixture of dialects that came from who knew where, wildly chatting on the phone with someone. There were people who ordinarily didn't speak loudly but started shouting as soon as they got on the phone, always suspecting the cell phone signal couldn't promptly transmit their voice. This fat man had plenty of breath, and his voice was clear and resonant, nearly raising the roof of the car. When he finally finished howling, the driver's ears were ringing somewhat. He couldn't resist looking at the fat customer in the rearview mirror, meeting his gaze. The driver hastily offered a rather professional smile. "What business do you do, sir?" "I had a mine back home before, but the business has been bad these last couple of days, and we shut down. But some friends of mine called me over here to get something else." The fat man shifted around somewhat uncomfortably on the seat. He spoke Mandarin with a bit of a lisp. "This car of yours won't do. Can you drive a better one next time? Last time we took one the last time we took one in, where was it? Some country where they all have big bushy beards. Their hotels sent a Rolls Royce. Sitting in this one, I feel like I can't really stretch my legs out." The driver pretended not to have understood his complaint and said deprecatingly, "The cars are all the same, company standard." "Oh, a company car." The man's lip curled. "Not like us. When we do your kind of business, you use your own car, working for the company, doing any job at the company that the company needs, and you get private jobs, be financially responsible. You pay insurance monthly, and if you get hit, you're responsible for it." The driver smiled politely and didn't respond, but the customer in the back seat seemed to not be able to read people's expressions. He wouldn't let him off, sticking his head out and asking, "If you guys scrape someone's car while you're out driving, who's responsible? Do you take the loss?" "The company pays," said the driver, cherishing words like gold. The earthy tycoon in the back seat slapped his thigh and leaned back hard. The seat let out a creak at the burden. "Aren't they gambling with their lives, then? If it was me, I'd come to a patch of a broken road I wouldn't go around, just drive right through. What's it to me if I get a flat? Normally I'd go out and get some private work, then say a customer had made an appointment. I could even get reimbursements for gas. Pure profits." Hearing these lines, the driver felt appreciation for the nature of the domestically produced tycoons and finally couldn't resist smiling. "The company has a management system. We all drive fixed cars when we go out and get centralized repairs at fixed times. If the gas and repair expenses are too high, it'd be visible at a glance. We'd be called to accounts." The man in the back seat gave a "oh." Probably he didn't sincerely want to know about the hired car's management system. He quickly started rambling pleasantly about something else, pulling idle judgments about Yan City's city plan from the thin air. He just reached an impassioned point when suddenly he clutched his belly. "Oh no, driver, how far to the golf course?" About 15 minutes. Oh no. The fat customer sucked in a breath and turned left and right, as though he were 9 months pregnant with a frog. His belly gave a series of croaks, then produced an indescribable gas. Oh no! The fat man cried, "Ouch!" as he looked fretfully around. "Where do? I can't take it. What did I eat? Stop the car by the road at once." The customer didn't know what he'd eaten, but the driver could already smell the contents of his intestines. Oh! The corners of his forehead twitched. Not breathing, he said, "Sir, this is an overpass." The customer used the resonant voice he'd used on the phone to howl, "I know it's an overpass, but you have to find a way to let me out." He not only said this, his belly also gurgled in agreement. The driver involuntarily held his breath. Unable to bear it any longer, he found a place to force his way off the bridge. When he just stopped the car by the road, the fat man in the back seat, like a biological weapon about to go off, impatiently shot out. Fresh air flowed in through the open door. The driver felt that his lungs were about to explode. He got out of the car soon after and lit a cigarette by the road, opening the car windows to vent the air inside. The unfortunate customer hadn't come back yet when he finished smoking the cigarette. The driver was feeling somewhat cold and was about to turn around and get back into the car when suddenly someone patted his shoulder from behind. Before the driver could turn his head, there was a heavy thump on his neck and his eyes went dark. He didn't know anything anymore. When his consciousness returned, he found that he had been blindfolded. Before he'd fully awakened, an extremely pitiable scream came out of nowhere, passing through his ears. The driver gave a start and felt that all his limbs were tightly bound and his mouth was taped shut. He couldn't resist starting to struggle. Someone stepped on his back. "Settle down." The driver sucked in a breath. The person perhaps had practice. He stuck a foot into the hollow of the driver's back, and it hurt so badly that half his body went numb. His face rubbed against the ice-cold ground. He didn't know where he was. Now the tip of his nose moved slightly, and he smelled a scent of blood that was difficult to ignore. A layer of cold sweat rose on his back. But soon after, following his initial panic, the driver calmed down, struggling to curl himself into a ball, and adjusted his breathing. He knew where the GPS chip on him was. He was old staff, having worked at the place for 2 or 3 years. The company couldn't simply abandon him. He picked people up and drove them back each day. He knew too much. Then he heard another man's voice. The voice sounded very pleasant, with a trace of careless indolence. There seemed to be a smile in it. He unhurriedly instructed, "This person is only an underling. Beating him to death won't be of any use. Don't hit him anymore. See if there are any other devices on him." I'm assuming that's Feidu. There was one in the pockets of his uniform, one on the bottom of his left shoe, one each on his phone and walkie-talkie, and one on his belt buckle. While we used a blocking device driving over, we still dealt with them all for the sake of security. This was a familiar voice. It was the fat man who pretended to be a customer. This time, there was no trace of an accent in his voice. He was entirely a Yan City native. I'm so excited for Lowen to meet. With all the hidden tracking devices located, the driver's heart sank. Someone roughly tore away the tape over his mouth. The fat man said, "On the 6th of November, the car you were driving today picked someone up in Bayonne. You said that you're responsible for your particular cars, so the driver that day must have been you." "November?" The driver stuttered, then deprecatingly said, "It's been nearly 2 months. Who'd still remember that? Dagger, don't you think there has been some misunderstanding here?" A hand deftly snatched up the nameplates on his shirts. The pleasant sounding voice read out his name. Sun Shin. Yeah, that's me. The driver struggled to raise his head in the direction of the voice, showing a fawning smile. Tell me your instructions. I know your wife works as a caddy at the Beehive Golf Course. She's pretty good looking. You have nothing against her. We're not planning to do anything to a young lady. But you have to cooperate. Try me. I'll cooperate with anything. Midday on November 6th, you drove today's car to Bayon's Longyun Center and picked someone up. This person was around 40, male, hiding his face and wearing gloves, cross-eyed. Well, all kinds of thoughts went through the driver's mind, but he dragged out his voice, seemingly slow to react. I'm thinking about it. Cross-eyed? But the other side wasn't having this. The pleasant sounding voice said, I see he isn't very well behaved. Dislocate his shoulder. Fate was quite a bit more intense in this than it was in the show. Wait, the driver had just spat out one word when the rest suddenly turned into a scream. His shoulder had been neatly dislocated and hurt so much he nearly passed out. His other arm was grabbed too. Wait a minute! Wait a minute, said the person whose words had just proved deadly. Laoru, who told you to actually dislocate it? The driver's whole body was covered in cold sweat. He trembled involuntarily, lying on the ground, gasping for breath, feeling he was about to lose control of his bladder. Then he heard the person go on in a leisurely way. You can still put it back when it's dislocated. It's a pain. Look, just chop off the other arm. It'll make sure he knows to be afraid. That was one of the company's employees. The driver cried out, unable to endure this. Everything went quiet. Even the constant screaming stopped. He's with our company. He said he had business at the Longyun Center and asked me whether I could take him. The driver swallowed hard, his eyes rolling constantly under the blindfold. The fat man's hand was still on his shoulder. The tip of a knife was under his chin. One of your company's employees? What's his name? What does he do? He's called Lulin, the driver said in a trembling voice. He's an electrician. What do you guys want him for? Do you have some kind of grudge against him? These people's style was too barbaric. They didn't seem like the police. As long as they weren't the police, you could say anything. I mean, they're not. But you're also still not safe. His dislocated shoulder hurt so much he was half dead, but the driver relaxed slightly. He knew that there were dangerous individuals among the people he came into contact with regularly. It was normal that they would have enemies, and if they weren't careful going out, one of their enemies would get eyes on them. When they encountered these things, the higher-ups asked them to be tight-lipped, but if their lives were truly in danger and they couldn't cover up anymore, they could give up whoever it was whose business had stirred up the problem. Only they couldn't say too much. The person who'd said he wanted to cut off his arm seemed to lean forward slightly. Almost in a whisper, he said, Liu Lin, did you know that his real name is Liu Gusheng? He's killed before, more than once. Do you hang out with these kinds of people? I didn't know. Brothers, no, bosses. No matter what he did before, it has nothing to do with me. We're just ordinary co-workers. I don't even know where he comes from originally. How could I know what he'd done before? The small knife traveled over his neck, passing by his face. The driver felt his nose itch and knew that the blade was too sharp. It had scraped off a bit of his skin, an eyebrow. Ugh. He didn't dare move a muscle. I have his phone number. How about I help you arrange to meet him? Don't kill me. You don't know his true identity? This time another voice put in a word. It seemed to be the person who'd kicked him at the very beginning. Does he know your true identity? First the driver was surprised. Then he froze. Your papers say you're called Sun Xin, but in fact it's a false name and a false papers. Your real name is Sun Jiaxing from Ji province. You have a criminal record for committing fraud. You have an old mother at home and a wife and child. The whole family thinks you're in Yan City, working hard to earn money, doing your best. They don't know what business you do, and they don't know that you've hooked up with a little girl around 20 and tell people that she's your wife, right? This time the driver's face at last altered. His ashen lips shook ceaselessly. Fingers snapped at his ear, an ice-cold phone pressed close. A hesitant, childish voice came over it. Papa? Hearing that voice, the driver struggled wildly, but a hand covered in a handkerchief covered his mouth. The child's breathing remained on the speaker, and there also seemed to be an accented woman calling, Jiaxing. The child said, Why isn't Papa talking? I miss Papa. The phone was suddenly taken away. The person whose voice had always been low and soft gave someone an order. Small children have delicate skin. Try letting out a little blood. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Thank goodness that Feidu is on the good side because he's terrifying as a villain. Faced with a coffin, the driver at last shed tears, wetting the blindfold over his eyes. The hand holding him had loosened at some point. As he cried, he crawled towards the source of the voice like a worm. The top of his head knocked against something. He didn't care, following the voice to rub against the pant leg of the person in charge, scraping the ground with his head. Don't. The soft-soled leather shoes gently pushed his head aside and stepped on his face, rubbing it against the ground. Don't what, Mr. Sun? I hear the darling isn't in very good health. A congenital heart disease, isn't it? A true pity for a parent's hearts. Listen to me, this child won't grow to adulthood. Give up now. Letting him go on ahead and reincarnate is also a kind of merit. Sun Jiaxing hopelessly lay on the floor. He'd only been tricked into evil ways in the first place because he wanted to make some more money to pay for the child's treatment. Unfortunately, his luck had been bad. Before he could make the money, his den had been raided by the police. It had all been frost on top of snow. If he was locked up, even if it wasn't for long, it would be hard for him to find proper work when he got out. And meanwhile, the child needed surgery at once, and no matter what, he couldn't get enough money for the life-saving operation. But just then, someone had gone through his lawyer to tell him that they'd sent money to his home. As long as, after he got out, he did some work for them that required being tight-lipped, they'd give him a new identity, and no one would know he had a record. He clearly knew that the pie didn't drop out of the sky, and that those people definitely had bad intentions. But his family's safety was in their hands. He didn't dare to be disloyal. He knew he was running a risk and might be dragged into something one day. In order to deceive outsiders, he'd found a fake wife to use as a shield, so even if he was dragged in, it wouldn't fall on his true family. What about the fake wife? Does she know? Is she okay with that? They'd even sworn up and down to him that his fake identity was rock solid. Unless the police came to investigate, no one would be able to find a weak spot. But why? I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything. Lu Guosheng booked me my car a day in advance. He said he wants to go to Longyun Center to see a client. When those people wanted to go anywhere, they have to set up with the company first, so the company can make arrangements for them to be dropped off and picked up. But he didn't go through the higher ups. He contacted me privately. He used your car privately? Yeah, officially he's an electrician at the company. He has an employee card, and that's how he's described it to outsiders. Whenever he goes out, he first has to go to the beehive. When he wants to use a car, he has to apply for it, and he has to pass through the beehive on the way back. That's this way, if someone gets their eyes on him outside, or if he stirs up some trouble and someone follows him, at most they'd go only get to the beehive. They won't find where he lives. He comes and goes often, so we get on pretty well, and we gradually struck up a friendship. He often asks me to privately drive him places to get some air or something. In other words, the beehive was a firewall. The Louvre had likely been one of the dens where they had kept wanted criminals, but there had been a leak, and they'd nearly been tracked down by Gujao. Perhaps their memory was long. They later used the beehive, a place very like the Louvre, as a front. If someone else investigated, they'd only be able to find this layer. If there was anything stirring, there'd be enough time for them to move. Where does Logusheng live? I don't know. The driver noticed that the questioner didn't seem satisfied with this answer and made to walk away. He quickly used his body to block the person, desperately saying, I really don't know. It's a secret. We don't dare to ask about these things. I beg you, don't touch my wife and child. Lo and Joel and Feidu exchanged a look in the dark, ice-cold basement. Feidu patted the fat man on the shoulder, and the two of them went out one after the other. It's lucky we didn't rashly charge into the beehive. Lo and Joel let out a heavy breath. The location of the interrogation had been Feidu's terrifying basement. Even the air inside was oppressive. He paused and then said, I've violated more than one regulation this time. If we can't catch them, this won't end with one or two self-examinations. If I really can't continue in my career, I may end up having to rely on selling my body for a living. What do you think, Lord? Will my looks do? I mean, let's be honest. I'm sure Feidu would happily keep you as a house husband. Feidu very cooperatively looked him up and down. That look was like the tongue of a large feline, licking over the clothes on his body with a layer of barbs, turning them to garlic skin. Lowenjo couldn't quite take it and raised a hand to block his gaze. Hey, I'm not selling yet. Behave yourself. Feidu laughed and was about to say something when his phone suddenly rang. He picked up, listened to only 2 sentences, and his expression altered. President Fei, the management of the beehive is too strict. They're always tracking their drivers' location. They seem to have noticed when the tracking device on the person we caught suddenly lost contact. Feidu said gravely, Got it. Be careful. You guys, leave. Afternoon, the city bureau was more bustling than a produce market. Director Lu's few remaining hairs became increasingly scarce. He called Taran into his office, smacking his desk, he howled at him. Not one of you pays attention to organization or discipline. Taran, tell me the truth. What is the Joker Lorwinjaw up to? Why won't he pick up his phone? Taran's hair was a bird's nest from rolling around on the narrow bed in the study. His face was full of innocent blankness. I don't know. He's not picking up my calls either. Making such a big shambles and then losing contact. Before Director Lu had finished speaking, a tearful shout came from outside. Why are you holding my son? Who gave you the rights? I'm reporting you for violating a citizen's personal rights. What did my daughter do? Do you have any explanation now? Listen, even if something happened to that girl, it must have been a boy who did it, right? What does this have to do with us? Ma'am? lesbians exist, and also I, they are so vicious, I don't necessarily even think it has anything to do with interest. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a guy. Um, where's your superior? I want to talk to your superior. What are you supposed to be? Do you know who I am? Director Liu took a deep breath, glaring fiercely at Taran. He strode over and went out, kicked open the door of the little conference room that had temporarily been given over to the parents to make the disturbance. He smacked the door heavily. This is a public security bureau. Who called you in to be We called you in to be investigated. What are you shouting about? The conference room went quiet. The expression of the man who'd been yelling the loudest relaxed. Observing Director Liu's body language and expression, he could just about guess his identity. He immediately became polite. And you would be? Director Liu looked him over. He could hear that this had been the individual shouting. What are you supposed to be? He directly ignored him, grabbed Taran's shoulder, and tossed him in like a chick into a crowd of parents glaring like tigers. This is the deputy captain of our criminal investigation team. He's responsible. If there are any problems, take it up with him. Anyone who makes a scene again, you'll all be dealt with as jeopardizing public safety. I can't believe he just sent Taran in as like freaking lamb to slaughter, it feels like. Just then, the security camera in the corner of the conference room, covered in dust for 10,000 years, suddenly moved slightly, circling the room full of babbling people, at last falling on Wei Jianhong in the corner. The phone in Wei Jianhong's pocket vibrated. Without turning a hair, he got it out to take a look. Then his expression changed slightly, and he pressed a few times to answer. I'm so excited for this bit. Okay. Chapter 123. Verhovensky 33. Fedor stood in the basement's narrow stairwell. This place made him feel rather unhappy, but it was still within the bounds of endurance, so he didn't disclose it. He only frowned, pondered for a moment. That driver just said that Logosheng often used his car privately. So was going to Longyun Center before also a private operation? Minor figures like them, while they have tracking devices on them, wouldn't normally be looked after very strictly. After all, they're the ones with nowhere else to go. They're the ones who need the organization to shelter them. But why did they react so promptly when he was only delayed slightly today? Did those people know that we're on Logosheng's tracks? Lowenjor was silent for a long time, his heart starting to sink, suspecting that this time they would receive another corpse, leaving them without any evidence. Just then his phone made a sound, receiving a message from Xiao Haiyang. Sorry, I just quickly want to check something. Xiao Haiyang was sitting in a corner of the conference room at the city bureau, euphemistically as a police force reception personnel, actually as a voice machine repeating "we have rules" every 3 sentences, listening to neither the good nor the bad, getting a crowd of irate parents so angry their faces turned red and their necks swelled. If they hadn't had scruples about this being the city bureau, they would have come to blows long ago. But in fact, Little Glasses only had one true assignment: keep a close watch on Wei Jianhong. In the instant Wei Jianhong picked up his phone and his expression changed, Xiao Haiyang instinctively felt something was wrong. He didn't think about it carefully. He came to a rapid decision. Putting his hand in the desk and turning on the miniature signal blocking device. The instant Wei Zhenghong pressed send, his phone signal was suddenly interrupted and the message got stuck, anxiously looping around, then displayed that it had failed to send. Wei Zhenhong's expression grew grave. He subconsciously looked all around, but there was nothing unusual in any direction. There were only impatient parents surrounding the hard-pressed young person in charge. Oh, there was also a four-eyed little police officer in the corner. Wei Jianhong looked at Sha Haiyang, not taking him seriously. Like a kid who'd mistakenly put on a grown-up's clothes and had shown up to buy soy sauce, Little Glasses was sitting there cautiously holding his notebook, giving off an air of inept schoolboy clumsiness. Wei Jianhong felt he was being paranoid. It was normal for signal to be bad inside a building. He took a deep breath, focused, and calmly went out the door of the conference room. Upon seeing this, the duty officer at the door blocked him. "Where are you going, sir? Could we help?" "I'm just going to the bathroom." Wei Jianhong interrupted him with a fake smile. "What, are you worried I'll run? You're holding my son here. Where am I going to go? Or are you saying that now we're here, we even need someone to accompany us to the toilet? Then I advise you simply get out your handcuffs and arrest us." He deliberately raised his voice for the last sentence. Many of the surrounding parents heard it and at once became even more enraged. While the duty officer stared, Wei Jianhong drew back his fake smile, coolly looking askance at him, and strode over to the bathroom at the other end of the hall. The city bureau's corridor was narrow, and the windows were hard to open. It had an oppressive look. Wei Jianhong felt that the sealed doors and windows kept both the light and the signal outside. With a grave expression, he walked into the bathroom, holding his phone, looking all around. Only when he approached a window did a weak signal appear. Wei Jianhong hastily pressed close to the window and was about to try sending again when suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a dark figure reflected in the glass. Wei Jianhong was startled and swiftly twisted his head. Unexpectedly, someone heavily chopped at the other side of his neck with the side of their hand. Shao Haiyang holding a garbage can over his head. ... Leng Chao, who just knocked Wei Jianhong unconscious with one chop. ... Oh, that's so funny. This is such a good scene. Leng Chao came around first, opening her already large cow's eyes wide and lowering her voice, asking, "Shao Haiyang, what are you doing?" The signal blocking device was one of the toys Lu Wenzhou had given him before leaving. When Shao Haiyang had turned it on, it had just been subconscious behavior. Then, watching Wei Jianhong hastily leaving the conference room, purposefully going somewhere with no people around, he determined that perhaps he really did want to contact his accomplices. Lu Wenzhou and Fei Du weren't there, and Cao Ran was tied up. Shao Haiyang was alone and unsupported. He'd panicked and lost track of consequences. Seeing that Fei Jianhong seemed to have found a signal, Shao Haiyang had picked up a metal trash can, wanting to knock him out on the spot. But before he'd had time to determine the right place to strike and a suitable angle, Leng Chao had popped out of nowhere and knocked Wei Jianhong down. "What are you doing?" Shao Haiyang blurted out in response. "This is a men's bathroom." Leng Chao, ... Leng Chao, in accordance with Taoran's request, had just questioned some of the students from Wei Wenquan's class to find out who had gone to Wei Wenquan's birthday party. She'd been about to report to Taoran when she saw Shao Haiyang going into the bathroom. Shao Haiyang's movements had been too tense and overbearing, as though he were about to carry out a vendetta against someone. Leng Chao had thought it very strange, and couldn't resist running the risk of taking a needle to the eye, peeking in as she passed by. She'd glimpsed the scene of him raising the trash can, about to bring it down on someone's head. The two of them looked at each other helplessly for a moment, then looked down together at the unconscious Wei Jianhong. Meng Xiao whispered, "Isn't this that little bastard's father?" Xiao Haiyang had no attention to spare for her. Before the screen could lock, he hastily picked up Wei Jianhong's phone. He saw a message from an unlisted number. There was a rat at the young master's birthday party. When and where was it? The message Wei Jianhong had failed to send at the critical moment was 116 Longyuan Center. Xiao Haiyang's thoughts instantly whirled, his brain almost overloading. Judging from Wei Jianhong's response, the young master must mean Wei Wenqian. But what did "there was a rat" mean? Was Lu Gusheng the rat? Sorry. If so, then from this manner of speaking, however you thought about it, Wei Jianhong and the others hadn't known before about Lu Gusheng and Wei Wenqian meeting privately at the Longyuan Center. Yes, he thought, that made sense. When Lu Gusheng had taken care to cover up his tracks that day and told his accomplice to avoid the security camera, he hadn't been worried about the police. The cameras at the Longyuan Center weren't part of the surveillance network. It was Wei Jianhong's territory. How could Wei Jianhong obediently hand the footage over to the police? He would be much more likely to erase it right away. If he'd been worried about the police, he could have contacted Wei Jianhong to cover it up for him. So it was likely that for some reason, Lu Gusheng had gone out privately to see some person and hadn't wanted the organization to know. He'd found an accomplice to pick him up. Wei Jianhong would have recognized the accomplice's car. While Wei couldn't have gone around looking through security footage for fun, for the sake of caution, Lu Gusheng still hadn't left behind the license plate number. What measure to counteract police surveillance? After all this time, it turned out that they'd just been flattering themselves. I mean, it could also just be killing two birds with one stone, like being more worried about Wei Jianhong, but also at the same time good to be cautious of the police. The beginning of November hadn't been just yesterday, and they hadn't known up to now that Lu Gusheng had had private contact with Wei Wenqian. So why did they know now, at this critical juncture? Xiao Haiyang subconsciously bit his lip until it bled. The wanted criminal Lu Gusheng's photograph and identity hadn't been made public. The police had only, at the very outset of investigating Fang Bin's murder, given the children who'd run away with Fang Bin a photograph to look at. But apart from the victim Fang Bin, the other children like Wang Xiao and Zhang Yifeng hadn't qualified to receive Wei Wenqian's invitation, so they hadn't been at the Longyuan Center that day. Now, however, those who had gone to the Longyuan Center before the crime had occurred were basically all at the city bureau waiting to be interrogated, and the police force's focus was on the schoolyard bullying. They hadn't asked them about Lu Gusheng. But also, aren't you glad now that Law and Jaws stopped you from making Lu Gusheng's existence public? Because otherwise you wouldn't have been able to come to this conclusion by process of elimination. In other words, unless Wei Wenqian had gone babbling to the whole world that he was acquainted with a wanted criminal who was guilty of heinous crimes, the only person who, by coincidence, could connect that birthday party to Fang Bin's murder was Wang Xiao. Pei Du and Xiao Haiyang had only accidentally hit on this piece of information yesterday afternoon. From yesterday to today, if no one had been overheard and accidentally revealed the secret, then only the four of them should know. So where had the slip-up been? Did the other side already know everything? Then would they toss out Lu Gusheng's body like a gecko's tail, once again breaking off a limb to save themselves, leaving them without any evidence? For a time, Xiao Haiyang's mind was in a tangle. The more anxious he got, the less he could smooth out his thoughts. Just then, Lang Chao looked over the page on the cell phone. Birthday party? Wei Wenquan's birthday party? So that's where it was. Xiao Haiyang turned and looked at her in astonishment. Taran just sent me to deal with that crowd of troubled young people and asked them who'd gone to Wei Wenquan's birthday party. Lang Chao said, I just finished asking them and was going over to tell him. Xiao Haiyang stared. After a moment, he thought of something and his pupils contracted. Where did you ask them? How did you ask? An interrogation room. Room 203, Lang Chao said. I just casually brought it up when I was finishing up questioning each one. Deputy Tao didn't tell me why he wanted to know. You asked each of them? Xiao Haiyang asked urgently. Did you mention the time and place? Did the students who answered you mention them? I asked all of them except Wei Wenquan. Lang Chao stuck her chin out towards the content of the message on the phone screen. No one mentioned the time and place. I just saw that here. What is going on? Xiao Haiyang sucked in a breath. So that was where the slip-up was. If one among the four of them had slipped up, or if a little more definitely yesterday evening someone had come along after he and Fei Du had left, gone to Wang Xiao's house, and learned this information from her, then the time and place as well as the fact of Luo Guosheng's appearance would have been obvious. They wouldn't need to ask Wei Jianhong. So it was Lang Xiao's brainless question that had attracted suspicion. Someone had been listening in on her interrogation. Xiao Haiyang's heart beat wildly. His mind was blank for 3 seconds. Then he bit down fiercely on his tongue and pulled himself together. No, it wasn't the time to panic. The other side had only heard Lang Chao asking about an irrelevant birthday party and gotten suspicious. They didn't seem to know the truth about Luo Guosheng and Wei Wenquan's private contact. The words "there was a rat" may have been used in a general to mean there was a leak or there was something unusual. He mentally recited "calm down" at himself 3 times. Then, holding up Wei Jianhong's phone, he carefully deleted the words. Longyuan Center, hesitated and changed the address to Feng Qi Center. The Feng Qi Center was in Nancheng. It was also Wei Jianhong's property. It and Longyuan Center, one in the north and one in the south, drew a large diagonal line between them, representing the dragon and the phoenix bringing prosperity. Xiao Haiyang hadn't been able to sleep the night before and had searched online for information about Wei Jianhong. These were some details he remembered. I mean, that's great as well because it's as far away from the actual location as they can probably manage. At this time, Xiao Haiyang didn't know that the sudden disappearance of the beehive driver had touched a tense nerve on the other side. He just wanted to get out some false information since it was better than nothing. Though the other side could find out by investigating that Wei Wenquan hadn't gone to Feng Qi Center, at least it could mislead them for a while. At any rate, they could only hope that Luo Wenzhou would act fast enough. Seeing the message display as successfully sent, Xiao Haiyang sighed. Then he got out his phone and sent a message to Luo Wenzhou. On 116, Wei Wenquan invited some schoolmates to the Feng Qi Center to eat. If Luo Wenzhou received the message, he should be able to deduce a great deal of information from it. If his phone had been bugged, the other side wouldn't see anything the matter with this. We love it. Lang Chao was bewildered. Are you in contact with the boss? What's going on there? Where did the boss go today? Xiao Haiyang looked at her and didn't answer. After he'd sent the message, he put away Wei Wenqian's phone and was planning to push him into a stall. But while Wei looked bony, he wasn't actually light. Tossed around by Xiao Haiyang like this, he seemed to be waking up. Fortunately, Nang Chan came up and gave him another blow. Xiao Haiyang looked at her with a complicated expression. "You don't know anything. Why are you helping me?" "If I didn't help you," Nang Chao said, "could you manage it?" Xiao Haiyang ... Nang Chao rolled her eyes at him, snorted, and thought, "Good for nothing." Then she bent down and grabbed Wei Zhanhong's legs, carried him into the stall along with Xiao Haiyang, then tied him up. I mean, that's gonna be a hell of a thing to try and explain to your superiors and to the lawyer he's gonna hire to defend him, but we won't worry about that right now. If you don't tell me about it, then forget it. This wasn't Nang Chao's first day at work. She knew that some investigations may have to be kept secret for a certain period of time and within a certain scope, though she was very unhappy to have been left out. She pointed to Xiao Haiyang. "Of course, I trust a colleague I've worked with before more than I trust a suspect. But if you've made me trust the wrong person, then you'd better watch out. I'll kill you." Then she walked out of the men's bathroom, looked around at the door, determined that no one was watching her, and was planning to slip away. "Hey," Xiao Haiyang suddenly called to stop her. "Room 203. I think the last time when Captain Law questioned Zhou Huaijin, it was also in there. Speak carefully when you use that room." The scene where the driver Sun Jiaxing had been abducted had been cleaned up. Feidu's people opened all the car's doors and abandoned it under the overpass. The driver's uniform and the tracking device that had been on him were all neatly arranged inside, and there was also a printed letter of resignation lying on them, as though he'd run away himself. I don't think they're gonna allow that, but okay. Not long after they'd retreated, another group of people arrived. A few men got out of the car and carefully examined Sun Jiaxin's black Buick. Suddenly, one of them held down his earpiece. "The Fengqi Center? Copy." Saying so, he quickly opened something on his phone, then shook his head a moment later, saying to the person speaking over the earpiece, "Sun Xin doesn't seem to have gone to Nancheng recently. There is a letter of resignation in the car. He may have run off himself. Should we continue investigating his whereabouts?" "Okay, got it." "Yes, sir. We'll come back." The man wearing the earpiece waved a hand, and the people around him left together in a well-trained fashion, driving the cast-off black sedan away with them. Feidu looked at Luo Wenzhou's phone, frowning. What does the good Xiao Xiong mean? Luo Wenzhou gazed fixedly at the message Xiao Haiyang had sent him for a while. "I don't know. Not enough information. I can't judge. So where is Luo Gusheng hiding? Hurry up. We can try our luck somewhere. At any rate, we have to fight on." "The place is definitely connected to the beehive," Feidu said quickly, "but it can't be nearby. They're so rich, they must have many hideouts. They couldn't be making do with one hole on a mountain top." Luo Wenzhou followed his line of thought at once. So there must be some form of transportation going from the beehive to the place where Luo Gusheng is hiding. But that transportation isn't the cars used for customers. Feidu said, "If that driver Sun wasn't lying just now, they go to the beehive from the place they're concealed, then go from the beehive to the other places. There are two threads, and there must be secrecy between them. Otherwise, there's no point to the firewall. The drivers of the customer cars don't know where the hiding place is." Giving each person a car would be too luxurious, and it was unrealistic. It would add a great deal to the possibility of a leak. And wanted criminals who didn't even dare to leave their fingerprints behind couldn't be spending all day openly riding around on public transportation. So, what did the driver say just now? Logishang's false name is Lu Lin, and his false identity is an electrician at the Beehive, right? Feidu suddenly stood up straight. An employee. Could it be an employee bus? Lowenjo stared. Feidu didn't wait for him to answer. He got out his phone and dialed the number. It's me. Are there any of you guys still left in the Beehive? There. I knew you wouldn't listen to me and obediently withdraw. Then, could you please do me a favor and sneak in to get the route of the Beehive's employee buses? At the same time, at Nanchang Fengqi's center, some stone-faced people barged into the security camera room. Seeing people from the head office, the manager didn't dare to ask for an explanation, only stood to one side, silent as a cicada in winter. We want the security camera footage for November 6th. Which private room was Wei Wenquan using them? Wei Wenquan? As he hastily got people to help investigate the footage, the manager sent someone to look into the expense record for the private rooms. Hurry! The confused secretary, forehead covered in sweat, charged over. Manager, young Mr. Wei hasn't been here recently. The manager said angrily, I didn't tell you to search recently, I told you to search last month. November 6th, the secretary said quietly. I searched from October to 6th of December. He wasn't here. The manager's eyes sparked. He was about to say something, but the man who'd come to search through the security camera footage looked concerned and strode out. A complete map of the routes of the employee buses arrived on Feidu's phone. I've got it. Leave. Okay, we're at the end of the chapter and we're at page 358. Let me just think real quick. We have about 8 pages, I would say, to go to reach the 55-page mark. So I think instead of taking my 10-minute break now, I'm just gonna go until we reach page 365 and then we'll stop there. Let me just drink a little bit more coffee because my voice is definitely going a little bit. It's funny because probably water is more healthy to drink for the read-alongs, but somehow it just doesn't do well with my throat. Okay, chapter 124, Berhobenski 34. There are 4 employee bus routes altogether. They must have been planned by a professional organization, taking into account efficiency, cost, and the times of day when the company changes shifts very reasonably. All the stops on the way located in comparatively densely peopled area. You know our country's neighborhood culture. It would be hard to hide in places like these. But there are 3 ring routes here, and one that goes one way. Feidu paused slightly. The ring routes can pick up and drop off people at any stop along the way. Only the one-way route has a terminus. Okay. Lowenjo fixed his gaze on him. So, this one-way route runs east to west. It drops off night shift workers in the morning, going from the Beehive to the scene park. It leaves at 10 and arrives at the scene park at 12. In the afternoon, it sets out at 2 from the scene park and arrives at the Beehive at 4. There is a 2-hour interval in between. An employee bus needs a parking lot and a rest stop. I understand what you mean, Lowenjo interrupted him, but this is empty speculation. I have a basis. 2 bases. Beidou said. First, the back half of this one-way route follows the same direction as the extension to the number 10 subway line planned last year. Their functions will basically overlap. One of the bus stops is less than 200 meters from a 10 subway stop. If I were managing this, I'd either get rid of the whole route or cut off the back half and turn it into a feeder shuttle for employees coming in by subway. A superfluous bus route uses up a lot of management resources and cost. Perhaps the beehive is especially comfortable with its wealth and doesn't care about that bit of money. Perhaps the managers are lazy in doing their jobs and don't react in a timely manner. That's all possible. Lord Windsor was accustomed to being a team captain. As soon as it came to business, especially when time was very tight, his manner would be intense. Having said this much in one breath, he remembered that this was Feidu, not one of his grunts. He hastily softened his voice slightly. Like, oh, I actually do want to sleep in a bed tonight. If you could be sure that Lo Guosheng needed to use public transportation to get from where he was hiding to the beehive, then I would agree with your judgment that this route is more suspect than the ring routes. But the problem is, how can you be sure? Why wouldn't it be a delivery truck or a minibus specially set aside for these people? Feidu became silent. He was a person with excellent packaging. If you didn't give him a good shake and compel him, it was very hard to tell what was inside. But in this instant, Lord Windsor suddenly felt that a heavy shadow seemed to flicker over his eyes. Lord Windsor said, "You..." "Because I heard something." Saying so, Feidu looked up at the stairwell ceiling. The suspended ceiling was of superior make, in the shape of a quill dragon about to eat someone. After all these years, it was still in perfect condition, its evil menacing. In this place, that day that I found the details of the picture album project in the basement, I was just wondering what it was when I heard Fei Chengye coming in, talking on the phone. Feidu's voice was very calm, almost without undulation. He didn't say that he couldn't enter the basement without Fei Chengye's permission, even though he'd had a little desk there to observe the punishments. He'd had a colorful marble in his pocket that a schoolmate had given him. He dropped it, and it had rolled down the stairs, knocking on the door of the basement. He couldn't let Fei Chengye see it, so he'd hurriedly chased after it and found that the basement door hadn't been closed. A boy around 10 years old has budding self-awareness and exuberant curiosity, and a natural spark of rebellion. So without getting Fei Chengye's permission, he'd gone inside and seen something he shouldn't have seen. He'd been about to run out in a panic when he heard Fei Chengye's voice. "Talk nicely to your twin Captain-Law." Oh goodness. If I recall correctly, what he said then was, "Set up some houses for them at the terminus. I didn't give you money to build dog houses, but do we really need to treat a stack of blunt old iron like holy weapons? If they won't live there, tell them to beat it. There are policemen waiting to distinguish themselves by catching them. If someone slips up and reveals his whereabouts again, then the people living with him will be buried with the dead." When Feidu was relating Fei Chengye's words, his tone and his body language were both subtly different from normal. Windsor almost had the impression that he was involuntarily imitating that man. He faintly felt that something was off. The picture album project had taken place 12 or 13 years ago. What grade had Feidu been in then? How deep of an impression did there have to be? How many times had it had to be recalled for him to be able to remember these words from his youth so accurately? But wasting even a second would be fatal now. There was no time to make him recall past events. Windsor could only hardly say, "The terminus. You're sure you heard right? Remembered right?" Yes. Fedu's gaze, looking back at him, was confident and tranquil. I thought over many times what terminus could mean. When I heard the driver just now, I realized that an employee bus has a terminus. Lowenjaw was silent for 2 seconds. Then he came to a rapt decision. Come on. Meanwhile, the enemy's line of sight were still trained on Nanchang. The manager of the Fengqi Center was all at sea. He trotted along after the person investigating the security camera footage. What is going on here? As soon as he spoke, the threatful man in front of him turned and grabbed the manager's collar. Go investigate all the food and beverage businesses under your headquarters' banner. The manager was just over a meter 70, not remotely tall and robust. He was almost lifted off his feet and involuntarily dragged along. No, everything under headquarters' banner. Dagger, that has to be requested from headquarters' big boss. How could I have the seniority to investigate? The person clenched his teeth, tossing him aside, and picked up his phone. Listen to me. Things aren't going well with Wei Zhonghong. I'm afraid he's under someone's control. There is nothing here at the Fenqing Center. Someone's playing tricks on us. Starting now, no matter what you have to do, whether it's a blanket search or going over to the school to investigate, I need to know where he was that day and what happened. Things were not merely not going well with Wei Zhonghong. His dignity had simply been disgraced. Xiao Haiyang, not daring to leave, had feigned having constipation and stayed in the bathroom. But Lang Chao, after she'd gone far off, was still contemplating Xiao Haiyang's words. She understood what Xiao Haiyang had meant. Her words in interrogation room 203 had been overheard and leaked out. It was very normal for someone to be listening in on an interrogation, especially when the people being questioned were critical figures in some case. The person in charge or some other colleague could come into the observation room any time to monitor the progress. Lang Chao's steps paused. She grabbed the railing and went up to the third floor observation room. The observation room was in an innermost room. There was a camera on the window outside that would capture anyone passing through. It was the weekend. Compared to the turbulent second floor, this place was peaceful. Lang Chao subconsciously looked all around, then darted into the observation room and went through the records of the camera on the outside window. Who would it be? It was the dead of winter and a Sunday. No one without business would come into work. The officers on duty and the criminal investigation team were all so busy they were falling over. They had no attention to spare. Lang Chao quickly went through the whole recording and frowned in surprise. No one there. I'm assuming there's a listening device, and I think that's what Xiao Haiyang was referring to as well. All afternoon, the third floor had been still. No one had gone by. Lang Chao whispered, "What the hell?" At this point, Feidu's people arrived at the scene park ahead of him. The driver, Sun Jiaxing, was tied up and left in the basement. Feidu found a couple of people to keep an eye on him, then went over, bringing along the very resourceful fat man called Lao Lu. On the way, Lao Lu received a phone call. A moment later, he said to Feidu, "President Fei, the guys have gone through all the places to park a car and filled up one gas within a 5-kilometer radius of the neighborhood. About 2 kilometers from the scene park's west gate, there is an unfinished ecological park that stops construction halfway through. There is a ready-made parking lot next to it, and a very small privately operated gas station." "Privately operated gas station?" Lowendraw said. "Yeah, there are some urban villages around. The villagers ordinarily use some trucks to haul goods. They don't normally go far. A privately operated gas station is cheaper than those other ones," Lao Luo said. Lao Lu said. He smiled rather overcautiously towards Luo and Zhou. The overly polite smile didn't manage to look sincere. He seemed to be forcing down his vigilance towards a strange police officer for Fei Du's sake. He was still dressed up like a parvenu. I don't know how to pronounce that. But when he wasn't pretending to be an idiot, his shrewd, reserved, even somewhat violent inner quality was revealed. It gave the gold chains and fur-lined jacket he was wearing more weight. I had them leave a drone to take aerial photographs to keep an eye on. I so badly want to rewatch the show with this part now. Lo and Joe, I'm from the City Bureau's criminal investigation team. Lo and Joe had noticed his feigned guardedness and voluntarily opened a conversation. What should I call you? The fat man who'd been so vulnerable. No, not vulnerable. Voluble. In front of the driver, Sun Jiaxing nodded civilly and answered, cherishing words like gold. Pleasure to meet you. I'm Lu Jia. I so badly want to call him Duja because there's so many Lus in this. Like there's Lu Gosheng and there's Director Lu as well. Lo and Joe observed his expression and body language and didn't say anything else. He went to his phone and stealthily linked up the intranet, looking up the name Lu Jia. He suddenly paused. In the case 327, for the last victim, the one killed most brutally, the name recorded for the person who'd come to identify the body was Lu Jia. His relationship to the victim was brother. Just then, something moved on the aerial image near the gas station and the unfinished ecological park. It wasn't time for the employee bus to approach. The parking lot was empty and the gas station was deserted. While construction on the ecological park had been abandoned halfway through, the little houses that looked like employee dormitories that had been built against the mountain seemed to be in use year-round. There were clothes hanging at some of the gates, and in a yard some men were playing mahjong in a rather leisurely manner. A burly man came out of the backyard, holding a box of food. As he passed by, people playing mahjong in the yard tensed, turning silent as cicadas in winter. I feel like the silence as cicadas in winter is a priest's version of Shilian didn't know whether he wanted to laugh or cry. The man carrying the box of food didn't so much as look at them. He went straight towards the east face. The drone hardly changed its angle to follow, zooming in. A little door opened. It was black inside. There was a basement. The camera lens wasn't quite clear enough, but it caught the man's profile. You could faintly see a fearsome scar on his face, running through half of it. One of his eyes was blind. Lowenjo's back went ramrod straight. What's wrong? Said Luja. Lowenjo said, the person looks like a burglar who was put on the wanted list a few years ago. He's blind in one eye because the male owner of one of the houses he invaded fought back and injured him with a vegetable knife. There were eyewitnesses, physical evidence, and security camera footage, but he evaporated off the face of the earth. There was a big fuss about it. If I recall correctly, the head of the sub-bureau in the district where the work of the investigation was concentrated was relieved of duty. They gave him a nickname, called him One Eye. He's delivering food. Who's being held in the basement? Lu Jia clenched his teeth gently, speaking deliberately. Lu Gosheng had lost his mind and privately killed someone for a half-grown child, and it was one thing to kill someone. He also slipped up. Now everyone was paying close attention to the police force's movements. As soon as the police investigation got too close, they could immediately kill Lo Gosheng in an appropriate manner and give the body to the police to close the case with. Lu Jia's phone vibrated. He picked up and listened for a moment. President Fei Weiwei at the Longyuan Center said that she saw the manager take a few people to charge into the security camera room. Sorry, that doesn't read right, so I just changed it a bit. Tell Weiwei to leave at once. Feidu stepped on the gas pedal. The car accelerated to 180 kilometers per hour. The little gas station was visible up ahead. Send someone to pick her up. Lu Jia said, President Fei, do we act? Luo Wenzhou said, no. Wait. We can't wait, Lu Jia said heavily. Officer Luo, are you planning to call for backup? Are you sure it's backup you'll be calling, and not someone who's going to report to the other side? Luo Wenzhou held down the fat man's shoulder. Without him appearing to move, Lu Jia's phone appeared in his hand. Lu Jia said, you. Luo Wenzhou held him back with one hand and quietly dialed the number on his phone. Hey Dad, it's me. In the Longyuan Center, the calm-faced girl leaned against the wall in the corner, listening to the noisy steps nearby. She took a few deep breaths. After they'd gone past, she cautiously darted into the employee passage and quickly slipped out by the back door. The Longyuan Center's manager trotted along, puffing as he said, Young Master Wei really was here that day. He invited a bunch of kids, and they partied until afternoon. They used the hidden dragon in the sky private room. I want to know who was in the room that day. The manager personally went up and quickly searched through the security camera records for that day. He started forwarding when Wei Wenqian and his assembled friends arrived, and continued until all the students had gone away together and the service workers delivering dishes had also left. Occasionally, one of the half-grown children left to go to the bathroom. No one else went near the private room. There was a breath caught in the manager's chest. He only knew that these people came from headquarters. He didn't know what they wanted. He asked hesitantly, Did President Wei send you to investigate? Does he suspect the young master has picked up some bad friends? These all look like kids. Many of them are wearing school uniforms. I don't think there's anything here. The person investigating the security camera footage ignored him, frowning heavily. Nothing? If there was nothing there, why had the police asked about it? Why would they purposefully mislead them? Don't fast forward. Once again, from the top. You guys, search the footage from the other cameras. At this time, Taran had finally escaped from the crazy parents and was receiving a lecture in Director Lu's office. His phone suddenly rang. It was Luo Wenzhou, once more contacting him after vanishing for half a day. Taran let out a long breath. Hey, Captain Luo. Yes, I'm with Director Lu. As soon as he said Captain Luo, Yo Liang raised his head. He saw Taran's expressions and oh, my bad, I forgot that my battery doesn't last that long. Let me quickly fix that. Okay, we're back and the audio still seems to be working. I hope. So I'm just gonna quickly go back to this because I think we're more or less done. Priest loves her Indians. Okay, let's see. um, he saw Taran's expression suddenly alter. His pitch even went up. What? You sure? The sub-bureau's nearest West Science Park swiftly received orders. The criminal police officers on duty requested additional weapons and hurried towards the scene. At the same time, several police cars charged out of the city bureau's back gates. Meanwhile, the investigator, wrangled over security camera footage in the Longian Center, received a mysterious phone call. He only heard 2 sentences and his expression changed. He squeezed a few words out from between his teeth. Impossible. It's not possible. How could they have found out? There's been nothing unusual at the beehive. At this point, he suddenly remembered the beehive's driver, who had mysteriously disappeared at the critical juncture. His pupils contracted. Just then, his subordinate said, "Wait a minute, something's wrong. 10 minutes have been cut out between 12:05 and 12:15. It doesn't link up." There you go. Okay, so we are finally at the end of the chapter. I didn't want to leave it unfinished because this novel and this volume has been really good about squeezing into hours segments. So we are way over what I estimated, but I am happy we got to here. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. And then the last stretch, we'll be finishing this volume on Thursday before I go on holiday. I am so excited. I'm so glad that we're actually going to be able to finish this volume before I went, because honestly, there was a minute there where I was thinking, have I put too much on my plate? And the answer is still yes, but at least this is one of the things that I get to tick off. So I'm so happy. It's genuinely making me want to rewatch the show though, because they matched it so closely that I'm literally picturing the show as we're reading this, which is super impressive. So again, hope you guys enjoyed it, and otherwise I'll see you guys on Thursday. Zadian.